A little girl left a note. On the bike of a dangerous man. That single piece of paper shattered his world, forcing a killer out of the shadows and into an impossible choice. One wrong move could reignite a war. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The chrome on Doc's motorcycle was cold under his fingers. He sat on it like a statue, parked in his usual spot across from Oakwood Elementary. The schoolyard was a riot of color and noise, kids screaming, laughing, chasing balls. His eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses, tracked only one, a little girl with two blonde braids, wearing a bright yellow backpack, Lily. She was the reason he came here every Tuesday and Thursday. It was his penance, his secret. Doc, a full-patch member of the Reaper's Sons, a man who commanded fear with a glance, was paralyzed by a guilt that sat in his gut like a stone. 2 weeks ago, a deal with a rival crew, the Iron Wolves, had gone hot, bullets flying in a dusty warehouse. He'd fired to protect his brother Mark. The man who fell was named Daniel, Lily's father. He didn't have to come. The war was technically over, the wolves were broken, their territory absorbed. But the image of the man's eyes, wide with shock, wouldn't leave Doc. And then he'd learned about the daughter. So he came, he watched. He made sure she got to school safe, that she left with her mother, a woman named Elena who now had shadows permanently under her eyes. Today was different. The final bell rang and the children poured out. Lily usually went straight to the waiting minivan, but today she paused on the sidewalk, her small head turning. She looked right at him. Doc's breath hitched. She couldn't possibly recognize him. He was just a man on a big, scary bike, a fixture she'd maybe noticed before. But then she started walking, not to the minivan, straight toward him. His blood turned to ice. Every instinct, every rule of his life screamed at him to kick the engine to life and roar away. This was a line he could never, ever cross. Exposure, connection, it was deadly, but his body wouldn't obey. He was frozen, watching this tiny, brave figure march into his world of leather and sin. She stopped a few feet from his front wheel. She looked so small, she didn't say a word. From the pocket of her jeans, she pulled out a piece of folded pink paper and a tiny, sparkly butterfly pin. With a seriousness that broke his heart, she leaned over, pinned the note to his black leather seat, then turned and ran back to her mother's van, not looking back once. The van drove off. Doc sat there, the world buzzing around him but sounding muffled like he was underwater. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the curse, the drawing of a grave, the word murderer in a child's scrawl. He'd expected it, deserved it. He forced a gloved hand to move, plucking the pin and the note free. The paper smelled faintly of strawberries. He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was careful, with round, looping letters. It read, "Thank you for the flowers on Daddy's grave. Mom says they were from a secret friend. Are you him?" The world stopped. The air left his lungs in a painful rush. He read it again, and again. The words blurred, the flowers. Every Sunday before dawn, he drove to the cemetery on the other side of town. He'd leave a simple bunch of white daisies on Daniel's headstone, still fresh, the dew on them. He'd never signed a card. He didn't know why he did it, only that he had to. A secret penance, unseen, he thought. A transaction between him and a ghost. But she had seen, she knew. "Doc," a voice crackled in his earpiece. It was Mark, his second, watching from a car down the street for security. "You good, brother? What did the kid want?" Doc's throat was too tight to speak. He just stared at the pink paper, at the innocent question that felt like a knife twisting in his soul. "Are you him?" "Doc," Mark's voice was sharper. "It's nothing," Doc finally managed, his voice gravel. "A drawing, kid's stuff." The lie tasted like ash. He carefully, reverently folded the note and tucked it inside his cut, right over his heart. "Let's roll." Back at the Reaper's Sons clubhouse, an old, fortified auto body shop, the noise was a physical thing. Pool balls cracking, the growl of classic rock, the boisterous shouts of men who own the night. Doc moved through it like a ghost, the note burning a hole in his chest. "You're brooding," said Jessica, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper wit who handled the club's books. She slid onto the stool next to him at the bar, nudging a beer toward him. "More than usual. School run get you down." He gave her a look that usually made people back off. Jessica just smiled. "That bad, huh? What, did the teacher give you a timeout?" A laugh, unexpected and rough, barked out of him. The absurdity of it, Jessica's joke, the pink note in his pocket, the reality of his life, created a weird light moment. Something like that, he grunted. But the humor died fast. Later, in the silence of his room above the garage, he took the note out again. Are you him? It was an invitation and a condemnation all at once. To say yes was to step into the light, to face the woman whose life he ruined, to look into the eyes of the child he made fatherless. It was impossible. Yet, to ignore it, that felt like a deeper kind of sin. For 3 days, he was torn. He didn't go to the school. He tried to lose himself in club business, collecting protection money from their bars, overseeing a shipment of auto parts. But his mind was always across town, on a little girl with braids and a grave with daisies. On the 4th day, he found himself at a 24-hour grocery store at 2 in the morning, staring at the flower cooler. He bought 2 bouquets, one of daisies, one of pink carnations, because they looked cheerful. He drove to the cemetery, the empty streets a mirror of his hollowed-out feeling. He placed the daisies on Daniel's stone as usual. Then, clutching the carnations, he walked to a newer, smaller stone a few plots away. It belonged to his sister, Rose, leukemia 5 years ago. He came here when the weight of the life he'd chosen got too heavy. I don't know what to do, Rosie, he whispered to the cold granite. This kid, she's asking for an answer. What answer can I possibly give? The wind rustled the leaves, offering no reply. He drove away as the sky lightened to gray. The next afternoon, he was back on his bike, across from the school. He told himself he was just checking, making sure the wolves weren't causing trouble for Alina. It was a thin excuse. He saw Lily, playing alone on the swings after school, waiting for her mom who was probably stuck in traffic. The note was in his pocket, and in his other pocket, a simple, unmarked white card. He watched her for 10 minutes. Then, before he could overthink it, he got off his bike. The action felt monumental, like stepping off a cliff. He crossed the street, his boots heavy on the asphalt. The playground went quiet. A few mothers gathered their children closer, eyeing the large, leather-clad man with wary looks. Lily saw him coming. She stopped swinging, her feet dragging in the dirt. She didn't run. She just watched, her big blue eyes wide but not scared. He stopped a few feet away, crouching down to her level, trying to make himself smaller, less threatening. The scent of leather and gasoline must have been strong on him. Up close, he could see the faint freckles on her nose, the careful way her hair was braided. She looked so much like the photo he'd seen on Daniel's grave. "Lily," he said, his voice softer than he'd used it in years. She nodded. He pulled the pink note from his pocket, holding it carefully. "I got your note." "Are you?" she asked, point blank. No fear, just childhood curiosity. He paused. The truth was a weapon, but a lie to this face felt worse. He nodded, a single, slow dip of his head. "Yeah, I'm him." A small smile touched her lips. "I thought so. Mom said the secret friend must be someone Daddy helped once. He helped lots of people." The words were a physical blow. Doc had to look down, composing himself. "I'm sure he did," he managed to say. He pulled out the blank white card. On it, he'd written just 3 words, "I am sorry." He handed it to her. "Can you give this to your mom? Don't tell her who from, just give it to her." Lily took the card, examining it solemnly. "Okay," she looked back at him. "Will you bring more flowers?" "Do you want me to?" She nodded vigorously. "Daddy liked them. It makes the stone look happy." "Okay then," Doc said, his throat tight. "I will." A car horn beeped. Elena's minivan had pulled up, a look of pure panic on her face as she saw her daughter talking to a massive biker. She jumped out of the car. "Lily, get in the car now." Lily waved at Doc. "Bye, secret friend." She skipped to the van, handing her mother the white card as she climbed in. "A man gave this for you." Doc stood up, meeting Elena's gaze from across the street. It was a thunderclap. She was beautiful, even etched with grief and now fear. Her eyes, the same blue as Lily's, locked onto his. They were filled with confusion, then dawning horror. She looked from the card in her hand to his face, to his cut where the Reaper's son's emblem was displayed proudly. The pieces clicked. The rival, the shooter, the flowers. Her face went pale. She clutched the card like it was on fire, shoved Lily into the car, and sped off. tires squealing. Doc stood there feeling exposed and sick. He'd done it now. The shadows were gone. The clubhouse was in an uproar. News traveled fast on the street, and the fact that Alina had been seen speeding away from Doc, her face a mask of terror, had already reached the ears of Paul, the Reaper's son's president. A meeting was called in the war room, a back office lined with maps and surveillance monitors. Paul, a bear of a man with a grizzled beard, slammed his fist on the table. "Have you lost your damn mind, Doc, consorting with the Wolf's widow in public?" Doc stood stiffly, his arms crossed. "It's not consorting. The kid left a note on my bike. She knew about the flowers." Mark, leaning against the wall, let out a low whistle. "The flowers? You're the one who's been doing that. I thought it was some old girlfriend." "It's penance," Doc said, his voice low. "Penance gets you killed," Paul growled. "It shows weakness. The wolves might be broken, but strays are still out there. If they think you've gone soft for this woman and her kid, they'll use it. They'll target her to get to you, or worse, they'll think the Reaper's sons are vulnerable." "The kid's innocent," Doc argued, a heat in his voice that surprised even him. "So were we all once," Paul shot back. "This stops now. You are not to go near that school, that grave, or that woman again. That's an order from your president." The room was silent. The other senior members, James, David, Big Mike, watching, their faces grim. This was the life. Orders were law. Doc gave a single sharp nod, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He had sworn allegiance to this club, to this brotherhood. It had been his family since Rose died. To disobey was unthinkable. But that night, the note and the image of Alina's horrified face haunted him. He'd written, "I am sorry," but it was nothing, a drop in an ocean of pain. He'd put her in danger just by acknowledging her. Paul was right. His secret penance had now painted a target on her back. The only way to truly protect her was to stay away. He tried. For a whole week, he threw himself into work. He oversaw the collection from their protection rackets with a cold efficiency that made even seasoned bookies nervous. He negotiated a new deal for illicit car parts with a supplier from the next state, his focus intense. But every quiet moment was filled with the thought of Lily wondering why the flowers had stopped, of Alina reading that worthless card. On Sunday morning, before dawn, the urge was a physical pull. He fought it, packing his room. He'd been ordered. It was for their safety. Yet the idea of that headstone standing bare, of Lily's hope fading, felt like a different kind of betrayal. He made a decision, one that twisted his stomach with risk. He didn't take his bike. He took an old, unmarked sedan they used for discreet jobs. He wore a plain hoodie, the hood pulled up. He drove to a different florist, 20 miles out of town. He bought the daisies and on impulse, a small potted sunflower, a living thing. The cemetery was shrouded in mist. He parked far away and approached on foot, his senses hyper-alert, scanning for any sign of threat, any other mourner. He was alone with the ghosts. He placed the daisies quickly. Then he set the little potted sunflower carefully at the base of the stone. It was bright, stubborn, like Lily. He turned to lave and froze. Alina was standing at the edge of the path, 20 yards away, shrouded in the mist like an apparition. She was holding a single red rose. She must have come from the other direction. She saw him. There was no van to escape to this time, no child to bundle away. It was just them in the silent city of the dead. For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them was charged, thick with everything unsaid, grief, anger, fear, and that inexplicable, terrible connection forged by a bullet. Doc slowly pushed his hood back, offering no more disguises. She didn't run. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. She stopped a few feet from him, her eyes on the fresh daisies and the cheerful sunflower. Then her gaze lifted to his face, searching, probing the hard lines for the man who left flowers. Why? Her voice was a raw whisper, shredded by tears and rage. He had 100 answers from his world: business, respect, a deal gone wrong. None of them would fit in this sacred, awful space, so he told a sliver of the truth. "I didn't know about you or her, not until after." "And that makes it better." A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "No," he said, the word absolute. "Nothing does. The flowers, they weren't for him, not really. They were because I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. She absorbed this, her eyes dropping to the rose in her hand. He brought me a rose every Friday from the gas station. It was stupid. They'd wilt by Monday. A sob caught in her throat. I missed the stupid things. Doc had no words. He just stood there, a monument to her pain. Lily asks about you, Elena said, her voice hardening. The secret friend. She doesn't understand. She thinks you're a good man who did a nice thing. What am I supposed to tell her? That the man who murdered her father is the one leaving pretty flowers? Tell her the truth, Doc said, the idea forming as he spoke it. Tell her I'm a bad man who is trying to do one good thing. Tell her to stay away from men like me. Elena shook her head, a bitter, broken sound that was almost a laugh. You think it's that simple? You stepped into our world. You answered her note. You're in her head now, and mine. She looked at him, and the charge between them shifted, becoming something even more dangerous and complex. There was hatred there, yes, but also a terrifying curiosity. This was the man who had altered her universe. He wasn't a monster in a story. He was a man with regret in his eyes, bringing sunflowers to a grave. The club has ordered me to stay away, Doc said, needing her to understand the danger. They think my coming here puts a target on you. They're probably right. There are still wolves out there looking for a way to hurt my club. You and Lily, you'd be away. Fear flashed in her eyes, real and immediate. She understood the streets. She'd been married to them. So what? We just live looking over our shoulders forever. I can protect you, he said, the words leaving his mouth before he could consider their weight. Not from close, from a distance. I have resources. I can have men watch the house, make sure no one bothers you. I don't want your protection, she spat. I want my husband back. I want my daughter to not have nightmares. I want to not see his face every time I close my eyes, and now I have a new face to see too. She looked at him with such intense confusion it was like a physical touch. They stood there, trapped in the impossibility of it all. The mist began to thin, the first rays of sun cutting through. The world was waking up. The sunflower was a good idea, she said finally, her voice exhausted. She'll like that it's alive. She stepped past him and laid her single, gas station red rose on the grave beside the daisies. A wife's love beside a killer's apology. The sight of it together was the most heartbreaking thing Doc had ever seen. She turned to leave, then paused. Don't come to the school again, it scares the other parents. She met his eyes one last time, but the flowers, if you stop, she'll notice. Then she was gone, disappearing into the dissipating mist, leaving him alone with the two offerings on the stone. He had his answer, a fragile, insane, silent agreement. He could continue the penance, but only in the shadows, and it bound them together in a secret more dangerous than any club business. Back at the clubhouse, he was summoned to Paul's office immediately. Paul's eyes were like flint. You were seen at the cemetery this morning. Doc didn't deny it. I was careful, no bike, a different car. It doesn't matter, Paul roared. The principle matters. You disobeyed a direct order. For what? A bunch of damn daisies. To keep the peace, Doc said, a dangerous calm in his voice. If I stop abruptly, the widow gets curious. The kid gets upset. They start asking questions in the wrong places. This way it's controlled, quiet. They see it as a gesture of respect from the winning side. It ends the chapter cleanly. He was spinning it, using the club's own logic of power and perception. Paul studied him, suspicion etched deep in his face. He wanted to believe it was a tactical move, not an emotional one. The club's empire was built on such calculations. You're on thin ice, brother, very thin. One more misstep. One hint that this is anything but club business, and there will be consequences. You're benched from the collections on the west side. Mark will take them. You stick close to home. It was a demotion, a loss of trust. Doc accepted it with a nod. It was worth it. The weeks that followed were a tense ballet. Doc would leave flowers before dawn every Sunday. Sometimes he'd see evidence that Elena and Lily had been there, a drawing left under a rock, a little toy soldier placed by the stone. Once, the sunflower was gone, taken home to be cared for, he hoped. They never saw each other at the cemetery again. It was as if they'd chosen different hours, respecting the invisible line. But the connection wasn't severed. It lived in the charged space between their worlds. One afternoon, Doc was in a diner a few blocks from the clubhouse, having a late lunch with Jessica, discussing the books. The bell on the door jingled, and in walked Elena and Lily. Doc's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Elena's eyes scanned the diner, landing on him. She stiffened, her hand tightening on Lily's. She looked like she wanted to bolt, but the waitress was already leading them to a booth right next to Doc's table. The air crackled. Jessica, sensing the shift, raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours," she murmured, her voice dripping with amused curiosity. "Not exactly," Doc muttered. Lily, however, had no such reservations. She spotted Doc and her face lit up. "Secret friend," she whispered loudly, waving. Elena shushed her, her face flushing with embarrassment and anxiety. She slid into the booth, putting Lily on the inside, away from Doc. The next 10 minutes were the most awkward of Doc's life. He could hear Lily chattering about her grilled cheese. He could feel Elena's nervous energy radiating from the next booth. Jessica, enjoying the drama immensely, started talking loudly about club social events, peppering her speech with obvious lies about charity fundraisers and bike washes just to see Doc squirm. Then disaster. Lily, reaching for her crayon, knocked her chocolate milk over. It cascaded off the table, soaking the bench and splattering onto the floor and onto Elena's purse and shoes. "Lily," Elena gasped, jumping up. Doc moved without thinking. He grabbed a stack of napkins from the dispenser on his table and was at their booth in 2 strides. He handed the napkins to Elena, then crouched down with more napkins to help sop up the mess on the floor and the bench. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same puddle. A jolt, electric and warm, shot up his arm. She froze, her eyes flying to his. It was just a second, but in that second the diner noise faded. He saw the gold flecks in her blue irises, the faint scar on her chin, the rapid pulse at the base of her throat. He saw a beautiful, tired woman, not just a widow. She saw a man with gentle hands cleaning up a child's mess, not just a killer. "I've got it," he said, his voice low. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling her hand back as if burned. He finished cleaning, tossing the soggy napkins. Jessica was watching the whole scene with the focus of a hawk, a slow smile spreading on her face. Doc ignored her. He looked at Lily, who was near tears. "It's okay, kid. Happens to the best of us. I spilled a whole milkshake once. Bigger mess than this." Lily gave him a wobbly smile. "You did?" "Sure did, all over my friend's bike seat." He was not happy. He threw a glance at Jessica, who snorted. The tension broke just a little. Elena managed a small, shaky breath. "Thank you," she said again, more firmly this time, meeting his eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, it was just acknowledgement. He nodded and went back to his table. Jessica leaned forward, her voice a playful hiss. "Oh, you are in so much trouble. That's not just penance, Doc, that's a spark, and Paul is gonna smell the smoke." "Shut up, Jess," he said, but there was no heat in it. He could still feel the ghost of her skin against his. Later that night, at the clubhouse bar, Mark sidled up to him. "Heard you had a family outing at the diner." Word traveled fast. It was a coincidence. "In our world there are no coincidences," Mark said, his tone losing its usual joking edge. "Paul knows, he's not happy, and I'm not just talking about club discipline, Doc. I'm talking about you. This woman, she's getting under your skin. That's a vulnerability, a real one. What are you gonna do when you have to choose between her and the club?" Doc stared into his whiskey, the amber liquid holding no answers. Mark's question echoed the one in his own soul. He was balancing on a razor's edge, and he knew deep down that he couldn't stand in the middle forever. The empire of the Reaper's sons demanded total loyalty, and the fragile connection with Elena and Lily demanded a humanity he'd buried years ago. A war was coming, not with the Iron Wolves, but within himself. And the ceasefire, like all ceasefires in his life, was terrifyingly fragile. The end came not with a bang, but with a note. Another one, left not on his bike, but slipped under the door of the clubhouse office, a brazen move that meant she'd come right into the lion's den. It was from Elena. Her handwriting was elegant, unlike Lily's loops. "The sunflower died last night. Lily is heartbroken. She wants to know if the secret friend can help her plant a new one at the grave. She's asking for you. Be there tomorrow, 4 p.m., just you. It was a trap or a test or a miracle. Doc knew it could be all three. Paul had made his stance clear. Showing up was outright rebellion. But the thought of Lily's heartbreak over that little plant, a symbol he'd given, was a pain he couldn't ignore. He didn't ask permission. At 3:45 p.m., he rode out alone, telling Mark he was checking on a warehouse. The sky was threatening rain, the air heavy. He saw them from a distance, two figures by the headstone. Elena in a simple black dress, Lily in a yellow raincoat. They'd brought a small gardening trowel and a new, vibrant sunflower sprout in a plastic pot. He killed the engine and walked the last 100 yards, the silence profound. Lily saw him first and ran a few steps toward him before stopping, remembering her mother's tension. "You came." "I said I would," Doc said, kneeling. He took the trowel from her. "Where should it go?" They worked together, the three of them, a surreal and sacred picture. Lily directed, Doc dug the small hole, and Elena placed the delicate roots into the earth. Their hands touched again in the dark soil. This time she didn't pull away. The charge was still there, a live wire of grief and something else, something terrifyingly like the beginning of understanding. As Doc patted the soil firm, headlights cut through the graying afternoon. Two cars, not one. They rolled to a stop on the cemetery road. Men got out, not Reaper's sons. Two of them Doc recognized, stragglers from the Iron Wolves, men with nothing left to lose, their faces twisted with hate. They'd been followed. Paul's warning had been prophetic. Elena gasped, pulling Lily close. Doc stood slowly, placing himself between his women and the threat. He had no gun, he'd come in peace. The lead wolf, a gaunt man named Vince, held a tire iron. "Look at this," Vince sneered. "The big bad Reaper, playing gardener with our dead brother's family. You think you can just take everything, huh? His life, his territory, his woman." "This doesn't concern them," Doc said, his voice deathly calm. "Walk away." "Or what?" Vince took a step forward. "You're alone." But he was. The deep roar of motorcycles shattered the quiet. From the other side of the cemetery, three bikes came tearing over the grass. Paul, Mark, and James. They skidded to a halt, forming a line beside Doc. Paul's face was thunderous, but his presence was absolute. He glared at the wolves. "You're on our turf. You're threatening our brother. That's a fatal mistake." The wolves hesitated, outnumbered and outgunned. The standoff crackled in the damp air. This was the precipice. A single move would reignite the war. Then a small voice, "Stop it." Lily had wriggled free from Elena and stood, small and fierce in her yellow coat, facing the angry men. "You're being mean at my daddy's garden. Go away." The sheer innocent audacity of it froze everyone. Vince stared at the child, at the defiance on her face that was so like her father's. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a hollow shame. He looked from Lily to the stone, to the newly planted sunflower. He dropped the tire iron with a clang on the gravel path. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the words were empty. He and his men got back in their cars and left. The silence they left behind was heavy. Paul turned his stormy gaze on Doc. "You disobeyed. You drew them here." "They were already watching her," Doc said, not backing down. "I drew them to me. I ended it. Here now without a shot." Paul looked at Elena, who was clutching Lily, and at the fresh dirt around the sunflower. He saw the picture, not of betrayal, but of something else. Something that could, maybe, bring a different kind of peace to their streets. The empire was secure. The wolves were now truly broken, their last gasp thwarted. A public massacre at a child's grave was bad for all business. "Get them home," Paul said finally, his voice gruff. "Then you come see me." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a stay of execution. Doc drove Elena and Lily home in silence. At their door, Elena turned to him. "You could have been killed." "So could you." "Why did you come?" she asked, the question hanging between them with the weight of the world. He looked at Lily, who was watching from the doorway. "Because she asked me to." He met Elena's eyes. "And because you let her." It wasn't love, not yet. It was a fragile, impossible bridge built over an ocean of pain, but it was a start. At the clubhouse meeting that night, Paul laid down the new law. The widow and the kid are off limits to everyone. They are now under the protection of the Reaper's sons, not because of him, he jabbed a thumb at Doc, but because it's smart business. It ends the old war for good. Doc, you're back on collections, but you stay clean with this. It's a truce, not a fairy tale. Doc nodded. It was more than he'd hoped for. The next Sunday at the grave, there were 2 bouquets, daisies from him, a single rose from her, and between them a thriving sunflower. Doc didn't hide in the mist. He stood there in the sunlight. A little while later, Elena arrived. They didn't speak. They just stood together, 2 wounded souls in the quiet, tending a fragile living thing in a garden of stone. The past was a ghost, the future a mystery, but in that suspended moment, there was a peace that left them both, for the first time in a long time, not speechless, but quietly, cautiously hopeful. Thank you for listening. Could an act of mercy ever be enough to atone for a lifetime of sin? Let us know your thoughts and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Subscribe for more stories where impossible choices collide. Until next time.